Welcome to Unbroken, the podcast. I'm Savannah Levins. I started this podcast because in my life experience and working as a news reporter, I found everyone's been knocked down or blindsided or had their world seemingly turned upside down at some point. And for many people, it's cathartic to talk about their experiences out loud. And likewise, it can be therapeutic to hear other people's stories and know that there is light at the end of all darkness. If you have a story you'd like to share on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Just email unbrokenthepodcast@gmail.com. And please rate, review, and subscribe. On today's episode, we have Leigh, who lost her only child in a car crash reportedly caused by someone who was texting and driving. Now she's trying to heal from heartbreak and push for change at the same time. Here's Leigh. Today I have Leigh on the podcast. Leigh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I know you from a story that we worked on together, so I'm familiar with your story, and it's about your daughter, Kinsey.
Yes.
So let's start from the beginning and tell me about Kinsey.
Kinsey was my best friend. She was kind of 3 going on 30. I stayed home with her when she was little, and she kind of only knew me, so she was my mini-me. She was brilliant. She was intelligent. She was beautiful. She was funny and witty and fun to be around. She had just started nursing school. She was a CNA, and she had come to my house for a surprise visit for someone she was hanging out with for me to meet her child for the first time. And they hung out for about 45 minutes, and then they left, and I didn't know this at the time, but I felt like Kinsey was a little off-kilter that night, so I tried to text her. She didn't reply. I tried not to panic because she said her phone was dying. So I started seeing on the news a little bit later there had been an accident on the Mecklenburg County side of the Lincoln Bridge that 4 were rushed to the hospital. 1 was a baby and 1 was dead. This was 3 weeks after Christmas in 2016, and my heart just sunk, and I thought, that poor family. And so I started texting Kinsey, please tell me you're safe. And she didn't reply, and she knew at that point that I would go after everybody I could. So I texted her boyfriend. I didn't know he couldn't answer till after midnight. Then I texted his mom. She said she hadn't heard from her since like 5:30. So about that time, my doorbell rang, and I looked out the side light blind, and all I could see was a Mecklenburg County badge on a police shirt. And I just started screaming. I started shaking my head no and saying I saw it on the news. And they were telling me to let them in and to open the door. And I guess I thought that by not opening the door, I didn't have to hear anything bad. So I finally opened the door, and they came in, and they asked me, was I McKinsey's mom? And I said, yes, please tell me she's okay. And they said, what can you tell us about your daughter? I said, she's my daughter. She's beautiful. Please tell me she's okay. And then he said, where were her tattoos and what did they say? And I know that not everybody has tattoos and that they don't all say something. He used past tense. My brain got stuck on past tense. I couldn't function at that point. And then he told me she didn't make it.
Was this one of those moments that you remember vividly, or was it one of those things where you just kind of blacked out and it's spotty?
No, it's totally vivid. It's like a Lifetime movie that I watched, but I actually lived in it. And it was like every night when I closed my eyes for at least a year, I relived this entire night. And I also could visualize the car crashing and Kinsey being in it and just all of it. And I heard stories and stuff about her being dragged out of the car and laid out in the middle of the road, and I know they tried to resuscitate her because her clothes had been cut off. And so she was killed instantly. It was blunt force trauma to the head and chest, and they said that, she obviously didn't know.
How long did it take you from absorbing this information to going into the mode of making calls and figuring out what to do next?
Kind of immediately, but I really didn't know how to even dial a telephone at that point. I just kind of stared at my phone, and I don't know, I called her dad first, and then I called my sister, and then I called her friends, and I was hyperventilating. I couldn't even hardly speak, and they couldn't hardly hear what I was saying, and then they would make me repeat it, and it hurt even more to have to say it again. Kinsey and I could get through anything. We flew together forever. It was just me and her against the world. Mm-hmm. And now it's just like I fly on her wings because that's all I've got, and I do everything I do for her.
How old was Kinsey at the time of that accident?
She was about 5 weeks away from turning 20.
Did that feel like a bad dream to you? I mean, I imagine it probably didn't even feel real at that time.
It's the most horrific nightmare you can imagine, and you wake up the next morning and you're like, that was a bad dream. I'm going to go about my day. It's okay. And then it's like, oh, Kenzie got killed in a car wreck. And then everything in you just sinks. You don't know what to do. You just get up every day and attempt to put your clothes on. And then it's like, well, what am I going to do today? I can't function. I can't do anything. I was in a black hole for a long time.
So what did you later learn about that accident?
I found out that the driver was using someone else's car, and he had passed the girls in Denver and wanted his car home, and he texted her and told her that she better get her blankety-blank home right now, and they were text fighting, and the text stopped when the wreck happened.
What was that like for you to hear, that it was likely a text distraction that caused your daughter's death?
I was more angry than any words could ever explain. I wanted them all to feel my pain, and I wanted them all dead.
And tell me when this was, for reference.
It was probably about 2 or 3 weeks after the wreck. I started finding out from various sources that weren't related in any way, shape, or form that they were texting. Mm-hmm. They originally started out telling me there was a deer. It was later confirmed by my attorney, the DA, and the 2 detectives that there was no deer.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me about, let's go back to, dealing with this really horrific heartbreak that you went through. I imagine this is something you never in a million years felt like you would have to grapple with. How did you? And I know it wasn't easy, or even for a while you didn't even think it was possible.
I wanted to die. I wanted to be with my baby, and I didn't care how I got there. And I cried a lot, and my daughter was the last family member I had left besides my half-sister in Raleigh, and I didn't have anybody to go through this with. I've been single for 6 years, and all I had was a dog, but Facebook was my outlet. And about 2 months in, I started researching things about people losing children to distracted driving, and I met a gentleman from New York, and I met a lady from Atlanta, and that's how I found StopDistractions.org. And that's where Mommy Bear on a Mission came into play, and now I'm not going to shut up.
Do you think that being the cause of the accident and, being set on that mission gave you a reason to keep going?
I always thought that being Kenzie's mother was my purpose in life, and even though her body's not here, she is, and I am her voice, and she's my platform, and yes, this is now my purpose. I had no idea. I'm this humdrum little girl from Hickory that used to be quiet and shy and didn't speak until I was spoken to, and now it's like, hey, let me tell my story.
And tell me about that process of telling your story. You've been very involved with these organizations. Tell me about that.
Yes, I did my first speech. It was supposed to be a big ordeal, but we had a hurricane coming through, but that was at the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce, and I had gone to the Distracted Driving Summit in Virginia. I went to Chicago to the National Safety Council to learn to speak to the media, and then I was in Raleigh on Kenzie's birthday on February 27th to go advocate against distracted driving. There's a new bill they're trying to get passed called H-144. It's the hands-free bill. And so I was back in Raleigh on March 12th. We did pass the Transportation Committee, so now we've got to go through finance, insurance, and rules, and then hopefully the floor, and we will know by May 16th if we've got this bill or not. And once this passes, I want to start fighting for Eyes on the Road to be hopefully McKinsey's law.
Mm-hmm. So right now, just for the listeners, there's a little bit of background. Right now in North Carolina, texting and driving is illegal, but it's really hard for law enforcement to enforce it because it is legal to have your phone in your hands and be looking at it to dial or pull up maps, etc. So if a police officer sees you on your phone and pulls you over, they can easily say, oh, I was just on my maps, and get let go. So this new bill would make it illegal to even touch your phone. You can't touch it. You need, Bluetooth only, if that. Why do you think that that's an important thing to have? Obviously, you have a vested interest in this, but do you think this was a long time coming?
Well, with this new law, you can touch something with one touch. Like if you get a call and you hit it to receive it or whatever, that's really all you can do. The driver of the car that McKinsey was in didn't get any punishment. She took a plea to reckless driving, and she got 12 months unsupervised probation, and she was supposed to pay restitution in the amount of the funeral. That was almost $18,000 that I had to pay. She hasn't paid a penny. She never apologized to me. She never reached out to me. I got nothing. She was in the hospital a day shy of 4 months. She got out, was in a wheelchair, had to have a lot of rehab. She had over 30 surgeries. The police told me the night of the wreck that she was probably going to pass too. Her little boy was buckled in behind my daughter. He was 18 months old at the time. I watched them buckle him in and leave my house, and he got a broken leg.
I think your story is one of the most difficult ones we're having, because I can't imagine losing a child. It's just one of the most unnatural things in the world. That should never happen. How did you find strength in that? I know that's what people are going to want to know. It just seems like the most impossible thing.
I didn't really. I'm not as strong as people think that I am. I just kind of get in robot mode. Mm-hmm. For the longest time, all I could think was Kenzie got killed, and I just relived this night over and over and over. And now it's like my brain will start, and I kind of tell it, no, we can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It kills me. It rips my heart out. And I've cried so many tears. It should fill the whole planet.
And you and I met because we did a story together. This was, I believe, last month, and we got a group of students together who admitted to texting and driving. I sat down with them before we brought Leigh in as kind of a surprise, and talked to them openly about it. And a lot of them said it's convenient. I feel like I'm good at it. It's fine. I know I'm not going to get in trouble, etc. And then, as a kind of surprise, their parents, of course, were in on it. But we brought you in to tell your story, and I never really got to talk to you too much after that. But what was that experience like for you, talking to those kids?
I thought it was very impactful. It really, you could tell it touched them, because immediately the one child in the front said, I want to give you a hug, and then they all did, and I don't think they'll ever touch a phone in a car again.
Yeah. And that's your goal.
Yes.
Yeah. For anyone listening who, that's maybe a habit for them, anything you would say to them?
There are a lot of people in our age range. I guess we grew up in a time where we think we are invincible. We're not. Kenzie used to fuss at me. I'm a realtor, and I used to be on the phone a lot, and she used to be my designated texter, and some days she just didn't want to do it, so I would do it. Mm-hmm. I had stuff to do, and I had to drive. And, she would be like, really, Mom? And she didn't want me, fixing my lipstick in the car or whatever. And we've just all turned into this society. We're selfish. And we don't think about these things. We've got to do what we've got to do, and we don't have enough time, and life is just crazy. And the internet just really kind of worsened things in our lives by trying to simplify it. A vehicle is the heaviest, scariest weapon that you can ever be behind, and it's just like a loaded gun. And if you're not looking where you're going, I can drive with my hands on 10 and 2 like I was taught in driver's ed, but if I'm not looking, I'm going to wreck. And there are some people now trying to enforce driver's ed teachers to start emphasizing overcorrection. And that's what happened in the wreck with Kenzie. The driver ran off the right side of the road. She was doing 62 and a 55. She overcorrected, and she went in the shape of an S and was T-boned in the driver's door by a Chevy Colorado truck.
I know those hard memories are still so vivid for you, like when you said the officer came to tell you about your daughter. But I imagine that now when you remember her, you want to remember the good times and the good memories. How do you remember Kenzie now?
Things just pop in my head. I still live in the same house that we shared together for 7 years, and I've kind of put her room back together, and I kept her car, and I drive it a lot. One of my cars was our road trip car, and I can just drive down the road and just think about things and just laugh and smile. And she's with me, I feel like, all the time. I'm more spiritual than religious, and I believe that there's the other side, and that's where Kenzie's at, and her body's not here, but she's here.
As someone who's went through or has gone through the deepest, darkest pain a lot of people could ever imagine, for listeners going through something difficult, is there any advice you could give? I know it's something you still struggle with every day, but any advice you could give to trying to find a little bit of light in that dark, dark place?
I try to reach out to people that I know are going through something similar. I've met 3 friends, especially, that have gone through this. One lost a cousin, and one lost her son, and one lost her daughter. I just let them know that I'm here if they want to talk. That's really all I needed. People told me I needed to go to the doctor, and I needed drugs, and I needed God, and I needed to go to church and whatever. No, I didn't. I needed my daughter back, and that's the only thing that nobody could give me. I just needed people to let me get it out of me. Mm-hmm. I was so angry. I was crying and busting wine bottles and just screaming at a higher being, whatever it is. I just want my daughter back. Mm-hmm. Over time, it's lessened. I don't do that anymore. I still cry, and I still get angry, and especially going to her grave. I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to meet there on her birthday. I shouldn't have to take flowers for the holidays. I get just really angry when I go there, and I just kind of relive that night again. And the fact that the driver's living her life, and she's got her child, and she's got her mom, and she gets to celebrate Mother's Day with her mom and her family and holidays and Christmas, and I've got nobody. And it's not fair.
Yeah. What about if you could go back and talk to yourself before this accident all happened? Because I think sometimes we forget that everything can change in the blink of an eye. Would you have said something to yourself then? Or what would you say to people who maybe aren't appreciating their lives as much as they could be?
I would say not to ever take your children. Don't take advantage of them. I didn't have any remorse when Kenzie was killed. Kenzie knew every thought, every breath, everything in my whole entire being she knew. And she knew it all up to the second she got killed, and I don't have any remorse over that. But if you've got a broken relationship with a parent or a child, you need to repair that.
Mm-hmm. And I know you have a very strong connection with Kenzie still. You feel very attuned to her in so many ways. Do you communicate with her still in some ways, and what is that like?
I talk to her all the time. Even if I'm out shopping or something, I'm just walking around talking to me or Kenzie, and Kenzie's in the car with me, and I'm sure people think I'm crazy, but I mean, I can feel her. Things will happen around the house, and, you know, animals can sense these things too. And, like, the dogs and the cats will be looking at something, and I'm like, Kenzie, are you here? And then it's like, I can just feel her, and I just smile.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anything else that you want the listeners to know or take from your story?
I could talk for days. My daughter was my world. She was all I had.
How can people learn more about this legislation and support it?
They can search it on the internet. It's House Bill 144. We should know soon if we're going back next Tuesday for the committee meeting. I'm doing everything I can to try to make this happen, but we need to take it a step further.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more technology we have in cars and the easier we try to make it, it's taken our focus off of what we're doing. And even in a phone conversation, it's going to be okay to talk on a Bluetooth, but still, I get beside people sometimes that are driving 30 in a 45 and they're on their phone because they're more into their conversation. There's nothing more important than when you're driving than your vehicle and your concentration.
Yeah. When you're on the road and you see people texting and you're behind the wheel, is that just a gut punch to you?
Yes, I actually wanted to get decals on the backs of all of my cars with a picture of Kenzie with angel wings and put "My only child was killed by a texting driver with a stop sign" and make them read that.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Leigh. Your story is so powerful, and I know this is something you struggle with every day, but you have made such a beautiful thing out of it in advocating for change, and I'm so glad that I got to talk to you again, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for listening to Unbroken, the podcast. We'll see you next time.